In July 2013, Pat and Dave Lamb, Linda Land, and Van White boarded the Ocean Princess on a beautiful day in Dover. We were beginning the voyage of the Vikings. The four of us had spent a week traveling around England and were now ready for a cruise and to spend time on the North Sea. We watched the white cliffs of Dover disappear from view. Then we went to our staterooms to change for dinner.
It is with great pleasure on behalf of Princess Cruises and the entire ship's company that I take this opportunity to formally welcome you on board the beautiful Ocean Princess for this 14 days cruise up to Iceland and Norway. We have on board 653 of you coming from 20 different countries around the world.
Our first port on this voyage of the Vikings was the Shetland Islands, Scotland. Shetland was colonized by the Vikings in 875. Consisting of a group of about 100 islands, the capital of Shetland is Lerwick, 100 miles north of mainland Scotland.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Shetland, to the Shetland Islands, to the archipelago of Shetland. My name is Nat. N-A-T. And today we are going to a wonderful island. We're going to the island of Musa. Musa lies on 60 North. We're going to cross the line at some stage, the magical line. What is a broch? A broch is stone towers, and the one you're going into is a top-notch one in Scotland. Because you are in Scotland, we are in Shetland, but Shetland belongs to Scotland since 1469, and therefore you are going to enter a wonderful historic monument.
There stood the tallest and finest Iron Age round tower in the world. Imagine, thousands of years ago, people came to this remote place and used these stones to create this massive construction. 44 feet tall and built of dry stone with no mortar, it was clearly meant for defense as well as prestige. We don't know exactly when the prehistoric people came here, but we do know when the Vikings occupied Musa because of a saga that tells how in 1153, Erland the Younger abducted the Countess Margaret and took her to the Musa Broch. Can't you just see Margaret searching out to sea from the top of the Broch, perhaps watching for her family to come to her rescue? There's a commanding view, making it impossible to approach the island without being seen.
So we are driving northbound, north of the 60 north latitude. And by Musa, you can wave at Musa on your right. There is an oil rig, I believe, in the harbour, and now at the moment, decommissioning of the oil rigs. It's happening. The oil boom that we've experienced in Shetland since the 72 onwards is coming to a very slow but some end. You see all these houses here. They're 19th century granite. Very normal, very normal. But here, on the last Tuesday of January every year, I want you to imagine 900 torches, men walking in the depths of winter with torches. The festival is called Appeli. This is the famous fire festival. We burn a replica Viking longship. This big building, this ugly thing is called a flotel here. And it's home to workers that are going to work at the gas plant. And here is the heart, really the heart of the city. Lerwick for the old Viking tongue and still Norwegian, liar, vek, liar, meaning clay or mud, and vik, meaning bay. Welcome to the Bay of Mud. Why did they call it like this, the Vikings, when they came? Well, I want you to imagine that back in the, 9th, 10th century of our time, when they saw this wonderful natural harbour that is Lerwick. It is a natural harbour, completely natural, not man-made. The sea was a lot further away at the time. Geologically, we are sinking. That's a fact. Norway's going up, Scotland's going up, but Western Shetland, we're just going down. And that's due to the tectonic plates, okay? The Earth is a very living, breathing planet, and we've got to live with it because we are part of it. But in any case, at the time when the Vikings used this stretch of water that is called the Bressesund, the Sound of Bresse, or an arm of the North Sea, where your boat is actually moored today, where the Ocean Princess is moored, well, at time, at low tide, they could see the ocean bed. Therefore, they called it the Bay of Mud.
The Shetland Islands, with a population of about 20,000 people, lie just above the 60-degree north latitude. This latitude is half the circumference of the equator and is 6 degrees south of the Arctic Circle. At summer solstice, at the end of June, the sun is visible at this latitude for almost 19 hours.
We docked in the port of Klaksvik in the Faroe Islands. We had booked an excursion to the capital and largest city, Tórshavn, which is several islands away. The Viking weather made us feel a bit like real Norse. It was 4th of July. We knew it was hot and sunny back in California, but no fireworks were on this agenda.
Yeah, we have a rainy day today. The city of Klaksvik. In Klaksvik here live about 5,000 people, and in Tórshavn live about 20,000. In the Faroe Islands altogether 48,000 people, and we have about 70,000 sheep. And the sheep they go all over, and they have a first priority. If you drive a sheep over, you have to pay 3,000 kroner. It's about $500.
Just outside of Klaksvik, this fish ladder helps salmon get from the North Atlantic to the spawning grounds. It rains 280 days a year in the Faroe Islands, so there's plenty of water to assist their climb. Fishing accounts for 96% of the island's exports.
Here at our left hand you can see a dark blue ship. That is a Russian trawler. Has been here for over 3 years. Got a penalty for overfishing, but they didn't have any money to pay. And then the crew, they left for home.
The Viking Age is considered to have begun in 793 when raiders landed at Lindisfarne off the coast of northwestern England. The Vikings destroyed the abbey and took the monks as slaves. The end of the Viking Age is 1066 when Normans, descendants of the first Vikings, were victorious at the Battle of Hastings on the south coast of England. The Faroese people are descendants of the Vikings who came to these islands about the same time as the Lindisfarne raid. The official language of the island is Faroese, derived from Old Norse, the language of the Vikings. In 1940, the Faroes were occupied by British troops. This was because of the invasion of Denmark by Nazi Germany. The British strengthened the Allies' control over the North Atlantic from the Faroes. In 1943, the British Royal Engineers completed the only airport in the Faroes. At the end of the war, the islands reverted to local rule. The Faroes are now an autonomous country within the Kingdom of Denmark. They have been self-governing since 1948. We stopped briefly at the Nordic House Cultural Center outside of Torshavn. This building is a result of a competition held in 1977 where a man from Norway and a woman from Iceland won the competition. Opened in 1983, the building represents a green dragon. Nordic House is a venue for concerts and plays. The statues of people are temporary installations as various artists exhibit their work at the Nordic House. Imagine it's the 9th century and the Vikings are standing on the rocks in the harbor in Torshavn. These seafaring people had just created the main thing, or parliament, for the Faroe Islands. Initially, the thing was held outdoors on an outcrop. Eventually, they moved into a small building on the top of the rocks. This ancient building is now the Faroe Prime Minister's office. The current parliament has 33 members and meets in a small white building in town. Representative government has been part of the Norse culture for over 1,000 years. Many of the sod-roof structures in this old neighborhood date to the 1300s. All are still in use.
Når jeg tenker på den forgangne tid, da kan jeg ikke annet enn sørge og kvin. Sorgen var i min ho, for synderne mine. Så dypt jeg jo din gås vreden står, mine synder meg trenger i hvor jeg går. Sorgen var i min ho, for synderne mine. Jeg vet da ingen i verden til, der meg enten hjelpe kan eller vil. Sorgen var i min ho, for synderne mine.
Yeah, we have come to an end. We are back in the harbor in Klaksvik. The driver maybe thank you for this trip, and we wish you a good stay here in Klaksvik.
Our first port in Iceland, Akureyri, has an ice-free harbor year-round, so the Allies chose it as an airbase site during World War II. Flying boats based here protected convoys for the US and UK.
My name is Gudmundur and will be your tour guide on this tour, and our driver today is Christian. Akureyri has today 18,000 people. At the end of the 18th century, only 12 people were living in Akureyri.
Iceland is located on the mid-Atlantic fissure, which goes diagonal to the country and where a mountaintop comes out of the sea. There's also a hot spot in the fissure, which causes greater volcanic activity, and the resulting lava has built up the island. 5 major geothermal power plants exist in Iceland, which produce about 25% of the nation's energy. Geothermal provides the heating and hot water for 90% of all buildings. Icelanders use this power source for heating greenhouses, to dry products like fish and wood, to bake bread, heat streets, and parking places. The sulfur fields at Namaskard contain awe-inspiring boiling mud pools. The distracting beauty of the colorful mineral deposits and steaming hot areas, combined with the absence of any safety barriers, requires you to stay alert, else you might land in one of these simmering pots. We arrived at Dimmuborgir, the area of an enormous collapsed lava tube. These shapes were left exposed after the area cooled 2,300 years ago. The lava poured over wet sod and a small lake to create these pillars and chamber-like structures. They're called castles or burgir in Icelandic. Folklore says that this is the place that Satan landed when he was cast from heaven. Norse paganism began to be replaced by the Christian religion when the law speaker announced the decision in about the year 1000. The law speaker owned this farm. When he returned home, he took the wooden statues of his pagan gods and threw them in his waterfall. Since then, it has been known as Godafoss, the waterfall of the gods. Viking decisions were made by the tribal council known as the Thing. The Vikings had an oral tradition. There was a law speaker who would proclaim the decisions of the Thing to the rest of the people. Icelandic sagas tell of these proclamations. A famous decision was the one to adopt Christianity in Iceland. Once the law speaker had made his declaration, he came home to this place and threw in the waterfall his wooden images of Odin, Thor, and Freya.
Isafjorda, an ancient fishing village, lies at 66 degrees north near the Arctic Circle. This was our first tender port. Since the 1980s, with the decline of the number of fish and restriction on catches, the area had to rely on other sources of income, like welcoming cruise ships.
So Ísafjörður is nowadays here lives around 2,600 people. And it was all basically formed by volcanic eruptions. So everything you see around is layered lava.
What I say, I'm teacher, I'm used to talk loud. Now we are in the settlement of Þuríður Sundafjörður. It was a Norwegian woman that came here from Hálogaland and settled here about 940, 930 something. She said that everyone that wanted to fish here had to pay her a sheep for the allowed to have a boat here. So in the old Icelandic stories, it talked about that the people came here to fetch fish and to fish here. So we believe that there has been the fishing huts here since the settlers came. And these houses, they were rebuilt in 1988 till 19 because we made a film here from the rowing ages.
Today we're going to show you some old Icelandic dances, and then we're going to go inside the museum and show you some old Icelandic songs, and then you're going to taste some Icelandic cuisine. So just follow us and we can begin.
Öll þakin í sig jörð, ekki séð á hornabörn. Þegir fuglar geta, en þó leiti út mó. Rauða hvergi lítur tó, hvaða hrafnar þetta, Hægt að gráta hringan á, heyrðu ræðu mína. Ég skal gefa þér gullið tá, þó grímur taki þína. Húðin mín í kví, hvíldu ekki því. Ég skal ljá þér duluna mína að dansa í. Ég skal ljá
And this church was built 1908, and it's designed by Rögnvaldar Ólafssonar, which one is the first Icelandic architect. And he went to Denmark to study. He started actually study relatively old, but he needed to come back to Iceland because of some health problems, and he was working then here until he's dead. But this church is designed by him, and it's Lutheran church, but it has some little features that it may look a little bit Catholic. It has, for example, one special feature in this church is the pulpit. It's kind of above the aisle. It's not there on the side like usually. And then there are these kind of red curtains, and some people often think that, well, that's the place where you go and confess. But actually behind these curtains you just find the stairway up to the pulpit.
Morning, yes. My name is Katarina Inga. So today I'm going to sing a traditional Icelandic songs.
Near our port in Gundefuda, we drove past an enormous lava field. It's named for the berserkers or wild Vikings. They fought with fury, and our word berserk derives from these warriors.
forecast. It's going to clear up around noontime, and it looks like it's clearing up already. We are in a fishing town called Grundarfjörður. But I was going to say, you will see an old church later on, and then you'll see that those were the typical churches of Iceland for centuries. But when the architects started making the new churches in the 70s, they wanted to have them completely different from the old traditional way. And we could say that the landmark of this town is this beautiful mountain here to our right, called Kirkjufell.
We walked down to the beach and found 4 lifting stones used by fishermen to test their strength. Traditionally used to qualify men for work on fishing boats, with the smallest being the minimum weight a man would have to lift onto a ledge at hip height to be eligible for crew. Also on the beach is rusty debris. On March 13, 1948, the English fishing boat Epine was wrecked on the rocks of this beach in a severe gale and blizzard. An Icelandic rescue party got a line to the vessel and took 4 crew off by Breach's buoy. 1 other crew member managed to swim ashore, but 14 were lost as heavy seas swept the wreck. Clinging to the bridge, the skipper was heard to shout, "I don't mind what happens to me so long as the boys are all right. Look after the boys."
This is Iceland, wet Iceland.
It's not icy, I think. Should be thankful for that.
Not icy? No. Damp though. Whew.
We drove through an enormous lava field named for the Viking warriors, the shield-biting berserkers. These fierce warriors appeared on Viking armor, were carved as chessmen in walrus tusk, and often appeared in sagas. One Icelandic saga tells us, "Odin's men rushed forward without armor, were as mad as dogs or wolves, bit their shields, and were as strong as bears or wild oxen, and killed people at a blow. But neither fire nor iron told upon them. This was called Berserker Gang." We finished our walk along the coast at a small hamlet of Burdur. It's believed that fishing vessels have been making their landing at Burdur since Iceland's first inhabitants came here from across the North Sea. We walked to a small hotel and had a warm lunch of the local catch of codfish. There were old black and white photos of the locals and killer whale bones for decoration. The hamlet seemed desolate to us, so far from home here on the west coast of Iceland. Desolate, but exceptionally beautiful. Their small black church was built in 1847. It's a very popular venue for weddings. Among the most valuable possessions of the church are an altarpiece from 1750 and a bell from 1672. A stairwell leads up to the organ. The nearby waterfall and lava field make Burdur an outstandingly picturesque location in Iceland.
The union of a cold northern climate with an explosive fire from within the earth produced this land of fire and ice, glaciers beside volcanoes. The first humans to visit here appear to have been Irish monks looking for solitude during the 9th century. Soon afterward, Vikings from Norway discovered Iceland and began to arrive in large numbers. The first settler was named Ingolfur Arnason, who arrived in Reykjavik in 874. Within 60 years, there were 20,000 people living in this beautiful place. In 1986, the Reykjavik summit between Ronald Reagan and Mikhail Gorbachev was held in this white building. They began talks which eventually led to the end of the Cold War. On the waterfront, Sun Voyager is a stunningly beautiful stainless steel sculpture by John Gunnar Arnason, descendant of that first Viking. Sun Voyager is a dream boat, an ode to the sun. It represents the promise of undiscovered territory, a dream of hope, progress, and freedom. Icelanders developed the first parliament in Europe in 930. This is the oldest existing parliament in the world. Called the Althing, its establishment began as an outdoor assembly on the plains of Thingvellir, the Thing Fields. This area is now designated as a World Heritage Site. Its dramatic location is where the Eurasian and American tectonic plates meet. Thingvellir has a cavern where the two plates are clearly visible. The assembly of Vikings and their groups met for the 2-week summer session of the Althing inside the fissure. The Althing decided on legislation and dispensed justice. The center of the gathering was the Lagberg, or Law Rock, where the law speaker presided over the assembly. He recited aloud the laws in effect at the time. The Althing at Thingvellir was the main social event of the year.
Þér og varist þér, vindur í lofti. Varist þér og varist þér, vindur í lofti. Blóði mun rigna og vera hljóði. Á mun varist þér vindur í lofti. Varist þér og varist þér vindur í lofti. Gróði mun rigna og bera gróði. Á mun og droga karfi skipta. Á mun og droga karfi skipta. Nú hinn skappa skálmöld boði.
The word geyser is Icelandic. It derives from this location where the first geysers were described in a printed source in 1294. This area has been active for 10,000 years. Wagner and Tolkien used Norse mythology and the sagas to develop the stories in their ring cycles. The helmets, the gold in the river, the bravery and wanderlust were all used to create their exciting new legends. Viking Age settlers brought their horses with them, their most prized possessions. The white stallion was the premier animal. Horses were venerated, and the sagas tell of bloody fights between stallions. These were used for entertainment and to pick the best animals for breeding. Today, the Icelandic remains a breed known for its purity of bloodline. It is the only horse breed existing in Iceland, and it is illegal to import a horse to assure this purity. We were thrilled to watch this group of Icelandic horses trot past us while driving back to Reykjavik. The Icelandic sagas were oral, but eventually written in the Old Norse language. These stories are based on the lives of real people. Leif Erikson, the most famous Viking, discovered Vinland, North America. He beat Columbus by almost 5 centuries. He stands today a gift from the American people to the people of Iceland.
Eða sturla Þeir munu byrni beitast Hver vís mest við Rómu Hver mun falla í frækni, faðir konungs eða Sturla. Kemur böðvar ótti, veit ekki tvö leggi, menn gera mest þeir unnu, mannspell lístir falla. Brátt kemur böðvar ótti, veit ekki tvö leggi, menn gera mest þeir unnu, mannspell lístir falla.
We stopped at the Round Top Perlin, a landmark in Reykjavik. It's an exhibition space, but also has a wonderful overlook of the city. We went on to the viewing deck and looked out on the waterfront and the giant church. We stayed only a short time. We needed to return the rental car, but we also wanted to make one final stop at the Sun Voyager and to say goodbye after all our fabulous travels in Iceland.
We had arrived at the very end of the longest fjord in Norway and the longest navigable fjord in the world, Sognefjord. We awoke to a dazzling morning. We were in the village of Solten. Nearby is the largest glacier in the European mainland. They built the cruise port in 2010. We were thrilled that they did. We walked around the base of the fjord and looked down the long blue waterway. It was great to be alive in Norway on this fabulous July morning.
The village in front of us is Shetlands, the very, very end of the very long fjord, Sognefjord, 204 kilometers from the North Sea coast. It's a small village of about 300 people. We are driving the main stop, which is Stave Church, a medieval church. It's even on the UNESCO World Heritage list.
The church that we see here today is the oldest wooden church in the world from 1130. First of all, why here? Why do you find a precious church here in Unes? Well, you have here a chief farm in a time where the water roads would be the normal roads. So sailing with boats and ships would be like our cars. So a central place with more people. Here is a door, not only a decoration, and you can actually open it today too. And it was, when it was used, even longer. It's a very narrow door for people who would have more muscles than me. And it's very tall, even if we know they were not particularly tall in the Middle Age. Around the door we have a lot of animals fighting with each other. And here we have one animal with 4 legs, warm blood, that we don't know if it's a real animal, more a symbolic animal, but it's the only one. And then we have here dragons, thick lines with legs, snakes here, and we have lilies. But this is regarded as unique, and it will be difficult to find anything more precious when it comes to wooden carvings in the world today. Yes, so no photos, but you're not photographing.
We were disappointed that we weren't allowed to take pictures in the oldest wooden church in the world in Unis. This church is timber framed and built by Viking settlers when they converted to Christianity. Imagine, this building has stood in place for over 1,000 years. Blizzards, wars, and rot have come and gone, but this beautiful medieval building has endured.
We have a crossing of the fjord lasting about 15 minutes. And that is part of the Jostedalsbreen Glacier. That is the largest glacier in continental Europe. Don't tell the Austrians that. They don't like to hear that. But I think it's always amazing how a large ship is reduced to almost nothing when you see it from this side and with the backdrop of the mountains.
Bergen, the second largest city in Norway, was our final stop on this voyage of the Vikings. Our ship was docked at the foot of the Bryggen, Norwegian for wharf. There you see the colorful series of commercial buildings lining the eastern side of the fjord. This is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, painted in bright colors and with a colorful past. After being established around the year 1000 by the Vikings, it became an important trading center. Cod was king. When the Viking Age ended, Bergen continued to be a commercial center and a prosperous target, often plundered by pirates. This area controlled import and export for this part of Scandinavia and traded often with Bruges, Novgorod, and London. In 1349, the terror of the Black Death was inadvertently brought to Norway by the crew of an English ship arriving at the Bryggen. Bergen eventually recovered, and in this same place we found a thriving market, much like in the Middle Ages.
Cobrar 326 corones en viu, no em fa el preu bo? Sí. Això que és que no sé les idees.
Són 12 clients. You can just choose whatever you want, yeah. And we prepare it in a dish, we have also beer, coke.
Wonderful. So you eat right out there?
Yeah, yeah.
What is the black?
The black is whale.
Whale meat. Oh, wow.
That's really pretty.
It was a drizzly day as we wandered around the Bryggen. Bergen has been called the rainiest city in Europe, with an average of 250 rainy days a year. Are those reindeer heads? What will Santa do next Christmas? A better souvenir might be a Viking statue, or one of those beautiful Norwegian sweaters. The outdoor market is overseen by the statue of Ludvig Holberg, a Norwegian writer. A window display caught my eye. Maybe a Norwegian sweater is a better souvenir. We drove past some of the oldest houses in Bergen. We went on a tour out into the countryside. This included a piano concert of Edvard Grieg's music. This native Norwegian is considered one of the leading Romantic-era composers, who was born in Bergen in 1843. The concert was held at his home, Troldhaugen. There's a recently built concert hall there which looks out on Lake Nordis. It also looks onto the small red hut that Grieg used to write his lyrical music.
Today's pianist is a very well-accomplished Norwegian pianist, whom to Tor Espen Aspås.
After the concert, we walked down to see where Grieg and his wife Nina are buried, in a granite wall overlooking the water. Then we returned to the concert hall and gazed at his melancholy statue. Finally, we meandered down the lane to our bus. In the Middle Ages, there were about 1,000 Stave churches in Norway. The last Stave church was built around 1500. Many were torn down because they lacked windows and were seen as too small. Today, this marvelous wooden Fantoft church in Bergen is one of only 28 Stave churches left. The building technique is similar to the construction of Viking ships, substantiated by its dragon's heads. Living evidence and a fitting end to our voyage of the Vikings.